Hello, everybody. I was trying to look up hello in Catalan, but I couldn't find it because the internet's too slow. So, hello, hola. Nice to meet you. I'm here today for the first time at Velocity not talking about databases, but talking about people. Specifically, how we get our teams to be more diverse. Who am I? I'm a database architect. I'm an entrepreneur. Depending on who you ask, I'm either a raging narcissist or a superhero. Good hair, not overly clever, and I use female pronouns, but I like to wear a tie. When you're in doubt, it's probably a joke, just laugh. It'll really get us through the awkward moments, get us through this. So, what I want to talk to you today is how we build teams that are diverse. Now, I'm going to start by talking about why we want this, and then I'm going to start talking about the meritocracy and why the usual implementation is bullshit, and then I'm going to talk about how to make a meritocracy that works. Some working rules that I like to follow: diversity is a goal unto itself. We want diversity not just because it benefits our company, our bottom line, but because it benefits everyone in the world. We assume good intentions. What this means is I encourage people to ask questions about people they don't understand. I encourage people to fuck up. I encourage people to upset each other. But we always assume, when something doesn't come from a level of hate, that it's a good intention. We foster a culture of forgiveness. This creates a chance for everybody to talk and learn, and for no one to feel like they should just shut up and sit down and not talk. Finally, we recognize privilege is something that is real, and implicit bias is something that is real, and we act to avoid both. So, why does diversity in tech matter outside of the fact that everyone deserves a place at the table? I talk about two levels of diversity to build a culture of diversity. Inherent, this is things that are generally immutable, but not always: gender, class, race, nationality, ethnicity, and then acquired diversity. In this case, we're talking about cultural fluency. We're talking about travel, military experience. We're talking about generational savvy. We're talking about the things that you gain as you evolve as a person. Now, why does this matter? Well, if you're an employee in a company that has two-dimensional diversity, you are 70% more likely to get your ideas to market. This means a culture has been fostered where you actually feel safe to speak up and be heard. You will not be talked over. Your ideas will be supported, and they will go out. As a company, if your people do this, you are 70% more likely to take on new markets and succeed, and 45% more likely to improve your market share. Now, I think it is an interesting fact that our top three most valued brands right now, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, are in that order, most diverse to least diverse, and their market caps match. So the second part of this, of course, is one we all know very well, one we often benefit from right now, which is our tech pool is very small. It's very limited. It's not growing at the level that companies' needs are growing. Now, it means our salaries are going up. I'm a SQL database administrator by trade, so I like that 30% jump. But at the same point, it does cost companies because they are constantly fighting churn. They're constantly losing people, losing mind share, and they're spending more money on fewer people, which means fewer code pushes and less competitiveness. By creating more diverse organizations, by encouraging people to come to the table who normally don't, we are able to build better products, and we're able to get better market share. And finally, my own component, which is our middle class is disappearing. Wealth redistribution is not great. Technology is the perfect place to rebuild the middle class. So, when I talk to people about technology, we talk a lot about meritocracies. People say, hey, Laine, I don't need to worry about diversity. We're a meritocracy. Anyone who is really good just happens to come to us. They happen to get the right positions, and we're all very happy. I'm just going to say it's bullshit and tell you a little bit about why. So here's a typical meritocracy, right? You've got an open source project, or you've got a company. You've got a governing group. That governing group is in charge of building out the contributing team, figuring out who's the best fit, and getting them into management, getting them into committees, getting them supporting the project. So the governing group's responsible for all of these things. On reach out and outreach, they tend to focus on their own networks. They tend to focus on people they've gone to school with, people they've worked with, people they've seen at meetups. If we believe the inherent fact that most of these organizations are also not diverse, this is a loop, and many people are not getting invited to the table. If they don't get explicit invites, many underserved populations, women, people of color, they look at that governing board, they look at that project committee, they see people not like them. Based on their own experiences, they don't show up. They're discouraged from showing up. So, 1/4 of this sample set of possible contributors are out the door. Next, the ones who are there, the ones who've decided to show up anyway or who've been invited to beat up, are subject to what I call the daily beatdowns. This is if you're a woman being hit on and sexualized to the point that if you say no to someone who has asked you out, they might remove your code from a project. This is hearing racist, sexist, homophobic talk in IRC and forums. Even if it is shut down by moderators, they still see it, they still get discouraged by it. This is being talked over, talked down to, having your ideas shot down, and then someone else the next week bringing them up and getting the credit for it. And on the final step, this is being part of the group that can't commit 16 hours a day to a project, to a job, because you have health issues, because you have dependents, because you don't have a lot of money and you need a second job, and you're looked at as not committed to the project as opposed to the ones who can. So you leave. There, half the people are gone. Finally, you have half the people left. Now it's the governing group's turn to figure out who goes into management, who becomes a committer, who gets access to decision-making in the organization. Now, if you look at the Apache Foundation, they say in their meritocracy discussion, we look for people committed enough for the task. We just talked about that. What does that mean? Well, it means they have the time to make 16 hours a day, which isn't everyone. It means they have matching human attitudes, which means they think like you. It means they work well with others, particularly in disagreement, which means if they spend any time fighting and bringing up arguments around being sexism, around racism, well, that's not part of the project. You're not arguing about MySQL 5.6 Galera versus Percona Extra DB, so we don't care about those disagreements. They're out. What does that leave? Well, first off, it doesn't mention skills and ability at all, does it? Instead, people are making generally unconscious and non-malevolent snap decisions around comfort and affinity, people just like them. In other words, they're creating a culture of comfort and not a culture of diversity. So that's what's left after all of that, after the implicit bias, after not getting people to the table, after the people who are discouraged, you have people just like each other. And if you look at the Apache Foundation projects, no women on the board, 6 women out of 105 committers for Hadoop, 1 woman in Cassandra, 1 woman in Subversion, and 2 out of 120 in the HTTPD project. I think it speaks for itself. So, I also think meritocracy can work, and that's what I want to talk about next. And I focus on 3 steps. I focus on getting everyone to the party. How do we get everyone to the party? Well, first off, the constant job is recruiting by everyone. This means every individual contributor in this room, every recruiter in this room, every recruiter who's not in this room, every person on a board, every project manager, every director, every executive. And if you look, here's some interesting stats as well. I love stats. 30% of computer science degrees in the US go to women. Now, Y Combinator, a big startup incubator, historically has only 4% admission rates for women. And then when you look, women did not comprise 30% of the applicants. So there's a gap. Why aren't these people coming to the table? This is a ubiquitous Doctor Who slide. I actually don't like Doctor Who. I'm sorry for the Brits who are out there. Much more of a Star Wars geek. So how do we get them there? Well, first thing we do is we set goals and we set metrics and we track on them. Now here's some interesting, very aggressive goals. What if we had all of our applicants matching our demographics? What if 50% of our applicants were women? What if 25% of our applicants were Black and Latino? Well, you'd have to let your teams drive innovation for meeting those goals, because if they don't change anything, they will not succeed. They're going to have to change the recruiting model. So first off, they have to reach out and build partnerships. There are numerous companies and organizations out there looking to bring underserved populations to your organizations. Partner with them. There are numerous meetups, online groups, LinkedIn groups, Quora, everywhere where there are specific conversations going on around tech and women, people of color, go out to them, tell them about your company, tell them about your jobs, network, and constantly look for people to bring in to get them to the table. And guess what? You're still going to fail. You're still going to not going to get enough senior staff to meet those demographic numbers. Etsy was a great model on how to then take this to the next level, which is if we need people, we're going to have to let people in who don't have the experience necessary to be senior. Now, this does not mean that we are reducing our quality or our standards. We're focusing on different opportunities. We're still looking for people who have the right aptitude, the right soft skills, the right energy, the right intention, but we're going to create opportunities for them to go from junior to senior while working with us. Etsy did this by building women's scholarships and partnering with a hacker school, and I'm continuing to build that out. And then in a few years, you can go from, let's say, 4% women to 18% just with outreach, and then 18% to 25, 30% by fostering training opportunities for people. So that's how you get people to the table. Next step, how do you keep them staying? How do you eliminate the day-to-day beatdowns? O'Reilly was one of the first large conferences like this to set up a code of conduct, and it's an amazing way to start because it encourages the right behavior. It tells people what works, it tells people what's allowed, and it tells people what's not going to be accepted. And put it everywhere. Put it on your site, put it in your marketing materials, your meetups, your email signatures, your code, everywhere. Let people know what you're about and what you're looking to foster. And then also make sure people understand what I said in the beginning, which is mistakes are forgiven when intentions are good. Hatred insults, anger gets shut down, but education is encouraged, and we don't isolate people. So that's how you can start to not discourage people, to encourage them to stay, to encourage them to learn, to encourage them to grow. The next step is how do you eliminate implicit bias from your decision-making and hiring and promoting and fostering. Now, orchestras in the 1970s were 5% female, 95% male. What did they do to change this? It was very simple. They put a screen up in front of people who were auditioning. That's it. There was no sensitivity training. There was no diversity programs, just a screen. And now it's 25 to 45%, 46% if you believe the slide over me, which is probably a good idea. So how do we do that? Well, obviously, when we're talking to people, we can't eliminate human factors completely, but we can start by applications not having names, not having pictures. It's all about the test results, it's all about the code, it's all about the resume. That will be a first factor in getting more people to the next step, which is the cultural fit, which is the advanced technical. And in that case, you need to recognize that your committees, your interviewing groups, need to be as diverse as your goals are. So if you're a small startup and you're all white heterosexual guys, and I know that never happens, I know that that's just a fictitious unicorn, but let's say you're at a startup with all white straight guys, but you actually recognize this, you want to improve it. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to find some women, find some people of color that you respect for their technical skills, for their aptitude, for their hiring, and contract them out to be part of the hiring process until you have enough people to do this internally. And then when you're doing the interview process, create collaborative testing, problem solving, different ways for people to work together to solve problems and to identify themselves as good fits for your organization. So, just to summarize, meritocracies do work, but they work with a lot of focus on diversity. They focus on getting people in, not assuming they're just going to magically show up. Because if you constantly say, well, we want to hire more women, but they never show up, if you keep repeating it, I believe someone said that's insanity. The second thing is making sure that once people get involved, that they're not experiencing the day-to-day beatdowns, that they're encouraged, that they're working together. And finally, you want to eliminate implicit bias and help in your decision-making to do that. And with that, you actually can build some amazing diverse teams which will encourage your companies to do better, you to do better, you to get more opportunity and growth in the organization, and probably bigger bonuses if that's a good part of the opportunity as well. Thank you very much.